Hello, my friends. How are you today? We are here on Sewing in Slippers with Sue. Every Tuesday, I come and I do something with you, whether I'm sewing on a project that I have to make for a future sample for a class or one of my long-term projects. And I invite you to come right along, grab your slippers, and sew in slippers right along with me from your sewing room. My goal is to kickstart your week. Mondays are a little slow around here. I end up doing a whole lot of paperwork and just getting ready for my week. And Tuesdays are my sewing day. I get everything off my plate for the business on Monday, and Tuesdays I just love to sit and sew. We will talk about our sit and sew on Friday as well, but for now, let's just grab your slippers, pull up a chair next to your sewing machine, and sew along with me. Today, we're going to be talking about my temperature quilt project and how I got a little bit behind last year on my temperature quilt. Then we'll talk about this year's temperature quilt, and we're also going to be talking about machine quilting today. I've been machine quilting my temperature quilt on my domestic machine, and I've learned a lot along the way, so I want to share some of those tips and techniques with you. Today we're also going to be talking a little bit about a quilt as you go technique that makes quilting easier on your domestic sewing machine. This is a technique that I teach, and I have a class coming up called Quilt as You Go Trees. And in order to get ready for this class, I need to get my background fabric ready. Now on this little sample here that I made for the class, I just grabbed a piece of pre-quilted, strip pieced fabric that I already had quilted. And I made this project and then assembled the quilt top in rows. So in order to get ready for this class that I'm teaching next month, I have to choose a background for this quilt. Now I wasn't too excited about the background. It was kind of blah, and I want your help choosing my background for the quilt that I'm going to make for next month's session of our Quilt as You Go Trees. Now what makes this quilt as you go? You can make each individual section of this quilt. I have this quilt in 4 sections, and they're separated by the trunks of the trees. The trunks of the trees are actually the way the quilt is assembled. Those trunks end up being the sashing that goes between the quilted sections. I'm going to quilt one piece of fabric, and then I'm going to divide it up into those sections so that I can easily create my trees over those pre-quilted sections. So yes, I'm going to be doing my applique on a pre-quilted background. So today I'm hoping you're going to be able to help me choose that background. I have some ideas, but I'm not quite sure which direction I want to go. We're also going to do a shout out to a friend who sent a beautiful collection of green spools of thread. Now you might be wondering why I'm collecting green spools of thread. Well, I want to give a shout out to, let's see, did I do it right? Oh shoot, I didn't. I had created a banner with the person's name, so I'm just going to give them a shout out here. This goes to Ann Rogerson from Ocean View, Delaware. I'm not going to show Ann's address, but just quickly, that beautiful label on this box, and I was so excited and pleased to find it filled with green spools of thread. So what am I going to be doing with green spools of thread? I saw an adorable Christmas tree made from green spools of thread. And many of you know that I do a Christmas tree fundraiser the first weekend of every December. Penny and I run this fundraiser called Trees for Hope, and we donate all the money raised to the Alzheimer's Association, as well as a cancer early detection program. I forget the name of it. I think it's called Detect Together, something like that. So, but of course the Alzheimer's Association is near and dear to my heart. So that's why I'm making this beautiful tree out of green spools of thread. So if you have any green spools of thread hanging around that are old as the hills, you don't want to use that green thread anymore, or maybe you're cleaning out somebody's stash, feel free to send me any green spools of thread that you have, and I'll give you a shout out here on Sewing in Slippers with Sue. So thank you, Ian. I really appreciate your package and all those beautiful green spools. Okay, so I do want to talk about my temperature quilt from 2020. I got a little bit behind. In fact, I had hired somebody to help me with stitching, and she got behind, I got behind, we never touched base, and before I knew it, 6 months had gone by and I hadn't seen any of the temperature quilt blocks that one of my associates was working on with me. So we quickly got that together. We quickly realized that we had let that slip, and we got all of those rows together just in time for me to get them assembled and quilted. Now, I did this temperature quilt with a big group of people last year, and we're still getting together one more time for the big reveal. Well, I need to be ready for that big reveal, and I need to get my temperature quilt put together. I'm making this temperature quilt with the same Quilt As You Go method that I used for the Quilt As You Go trees. So if you're taking that workshop with me, if you're one of my members of Ahead of the Curve, you have that as an option for a workshop this upcoming month. So you'll get to learn this Quilt As You Go technique. Also, the temperature quilt pattern and instructions and videos to learn this Quilt As You Go technique are up on my website. So if you're looking at this cherrywood this cherrywood leaves quilt, and you absolutely love this quilt, you can grab the program on SuePellinDesigns.com. Now, across the bottom of the screen, I have a sign up for Fabulous Fusibles. Now, you can't click on this one, but you can go to my website, SuePellinDesigns.com, and click on the pink banner to sign up for Fabulous Fusibles. All of the applique that I do is made with a fabulous fusible called Misty Fuse. And during Fabulous Fusibles, we're going to look at the pros and cons of fusible applique and some of the fusibles that are currently out there on the market. But I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the fusibles because I have found the perfect fusible to use for fusible applique, and that's Misty Fuse. So I'll be showing you how to use the Misty Fuse, showing you how to use some tools to cut out your applique shapes, and you can make these beautiful applique quilts right along with me here on Sewing in Slippers with Sue. So let me show you this temperature quilt that I've been working on and how far what kind of progress I've made in the past couple of weeks. So I just got the rows back from somebody who's sewing for me, and I had to put the rows together with a sashing in between. Now this is my last section. This is April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. I have to count it out every time. So October, November, and December got cold again, so I'm into my cold temperatures. This is going to be beautiful because these cold temperatures on December are going to be like bookends to the cold temperatures that happened in January. So I've been quilting this quilt in sections. I've been quilting it one season at a time. So I'm considering this my fall season, October, November, and December. My winter season was the first 3 months of the year. Here in New England, winter really starts in January, February, and March. In fact, it's snowing today, the last day of January, and it is snowing. So, let me go ahead and put the comments up here so I can see your comments. Okay, so I have October, November, December together, and I added on my outer border for the quilt. So I got my outer border quilted. I've got all the sashing rows quilted, and today I need to quilt in between and up and around the leaves. So this one is half quilted, and it's my final season. So I'm really excited with the progress that I have made. Now, last week I put together the summer season. Okay, so here is my summer season, and you can see it's using all of those beautiful hot colors, all of the reds and oranges and purples. I just love the summer season with all of these hot, hot, hot colors. And you can see that I've done my quilting up into the leaves, around the leaves, and between the leaves on every single row. Now, machine quilting on your domestic machine is really nothing to be afraid of. Yes, there is a learning curve. Absolutely, there is a learning curve. But as you perfect these techniques, you're going to be able to quilt your own quilts and save a bundle of money on machine quilting fees. So you're going to want to learn to machine quilt, and a wonderful way to do that is with a smaller project. That's why the Quilt As You Go Trees is the perfect project to get started with. Now, currently, this is only available to members of Ahead of the Curve. So if you are a member, yoo-hoo, that's awesome. You're going to get to practice your machine quilting. And we need to do that before the workshop. So today, I want to get you started on your machine quilting so that you can be ready for the workshop. I want you to have that background pre-quilted. So let's talk about getting that all ready for quilting. So on the temperature quilt, and here are my first two seasons, and my first two seasons are joined together here in the middle with a sashing strip. Now you would never know that that sashing strip is your assembly method to put this whole quilt together. So I made each season individually, just like we're going to make our tree sections individually with the applique done on each section in the quilting phase. That's what's different about that new project versus this project. For this project, I did my applique first and I did my quilting later. For the project that we're going to work on, the Quilt As You Go Trees, we're going to do our quilting first and then we're going to do our applique after. It's a really fun method to make a very quick quilt. So let me get this down. And what I wanted to say, and I forgot, was that we need some batting. And in order to do this in a very easy way, we're going to use the batting from Hobbs that is an 80, let me think about that. I think it's an 80-20, or it might be 100% cotton, but the whole point of this batting is it's fusible. So the Hobbs fusible batting is out on my website, SuePellinDesigns.com, and you can pick up that batting in a roll. So you have just cotton batting, just like this, but this batting is fusible. We're going to put this together using our iron, our backing fabric, and our front quilt fabric. So we're going to get started on that. I've got my batting all ready to go, and I need you to help me choose my background. I haven't decided yet what my background is going to be for the Quilt As You Go Trees. So I'm going to need your help. When I first did my Quilt As You Go Trees, I used something that I already had quilted. So it was just a random piece of beige, strippy background fabric. And everybody said, you know what, I don't hate it because it kind of looks like a cityscape behind the trees. Well, that got me thinking. Maybe I want to do another cityscape behind my trees, and I would love to call it Central Park. Central Park in New York City is one of my favorite places to go. I love walking through in the springtime when all the tulips are in bloom, all the daffodils, Shakespeare's Garden, and Strawberry Fields in Central Park are just two of my absolute favorite places. I love the turtle pond. There's just so many things in Central Park that I love. So I considered using a true cityscape fabric. And in my head, I had yards of this fabric. And when I went to search for it today, this is all I could find. So I don't think that this piece of the cityscape is going to be big enough to do I know it's not going to be big enough to do this quilt. And it's not really New York City anyway. It has this big Space Needle in it. It has like a big, looks like, yeah, it does have the Statue of Liberty. I don't know if it's supposed to be New York City or not. I don't remember ever seeing a Space Needle in New York City. And that kind of looks like the Capitol building on there. And I'm sure there's a building that looks like that in New York. But I just don't think I'm going to be able to use it. It's just not big enough. And I was thinking, well, maybe I could piece in some other fabrics with it and do some strip piecing. And I certainly could. But I'm not sure that's the direction I want to go. When I think about it, and I think about putting these trees on top of that dark background, I'm not sure I'm going to love the effect. So I might be changing my tune here. So I'm considering doing, back on the cityscape. I was considering using this fabric because this fabric looks a lot like buildings, and that broken up with the trees would look like a cityscape as well. But once again, I just don't think that there's enough of this fabric. I'd have to piece it, and not such a big fan of piecing that very geometric fabric. So then I thought maybe I'm going to go a totally different direction. And I have this fabric that I've kind of been hoarding. It's something that I bought a lot of because I loved it so much. And it's got some beautiful leaves, and you'll see there's little birds throughout that beautiful batik fabric. So this would be a safe bet for sure. I could certainly use this fabric, use this on my back and on the front of the quilt because there's plenty of it. But I'm just afraid to use it. I love it so much, and I think I bought 3 or 4 yards. So this could go into a bigger project. So I'm maybe going to hoard this fabric and not use it quite yet. But isn't it gorgeous? I truly think that this Jason Yenter fabric from In the Beginning Fabrics would be wonderful behind my trees. So let's think about that. I need you to help me decide. So the Jason Yenter fabric, let's look at that with the trees. So if I use this fabric, I'm going to have to choose my leaves very carefully because they're just going to disappear if I use these teal color leaves. So if I do use this fabric, I'm going to have to go for the stronger, darker leaves and more green leaves. Most of these are in the bluer family, in the teal family. I would have to use leaves that are all olive green and hunter green and true Kelly green. And I tried to use a different color leaf on each one of my trees so that you could see one tree in front of the other. So one of the trees has really light leaves and the other tree has really dark leaves. So it would be hard to choose all the leaf colors so they don't blend with this fabric, so they really stand out on the fabric. So maybe it's not the best choice. Maybe I can save that one for another project. So let's take another look at my stash today. I just went into my stash and I grabbed all of the fabrics that might work. Now you'll see my stash is not organized. It's not folded. It's just fabrics thrown together in bins of similar color fabrics. Why do I do that? Because I know I'm going to rifle through those bins. I know I'm going to mess everything up. My fabric is all washed, so I do normally press it and trim the edges before I put it in the bin, but not necessarily. Sometimes I wait. I just throw it in the bin. I know I'm going to need to iron that fabric before I use it anyway, and oftentimes I'm fusing my fabric, so I certainly am going to be ironing it. So why take all that time to wash, iron, fold all that fabric, nice neat little fat quarters or nice little bundles, and then I just mess it all up again anyway. So I tend not to keep my fabric really organized in my bins. Well, I found this beautiful fabric, and I absolutely love all of the fall colors. So I could, that camera doesn't want to focus, I could use this fabric because look at the shapes. This is all ferns. So the rounded shapes of the leaves would really stand out against the ferns. And my backyard has ferns all over the place. It is filled with ferns. So this really reminds me of my backyard. Then I've got some really tall, beautiful trees. So this really would be a very good choice. And I have a big enough piece, and I don't have to do any piecing because it's all one big piece. So this might be a really good choice. So far, I think that that is, so far I think that this is maybe taking the first spot right now. So I really love this fabric. This would be a great choice. So I also pulled out any other fabric that I thought would go with that fabric. So if I did decide that I wanted that fall looking background, I pulled out all these beautiful fall colors and this African fabric that I didn't know what to do with. So I kind of like the idea of maybe doing a little strip piecing, and this would work out well with this. So maybe I'm going to use this from the back of the quilt and these other fabrics in the front of the quilt. But let's think about the back of that quilt. The back of our quilt as you go quilts have a back sashing. The method that we're going to use has a back sashing. You can really see it on this quilt because I was not careful and I didn't have that same brown fabric. So I used any brown fabric in my stash and it doesn't match exactly. Also, I haven't quilted those tree trunks yet. When I quilt the tree trunks on the front of the quilt, it's going to add to the quilting on the back of the quilt, and it's going to help those strips blend right in. So I might want to use one of the more busy fabrics on the back of the quilt. That way, those sashing pieces, if I cut them from this same fabric, they will blend right in. So I'm kind of thinking that this would make a good back for my quilt. And maybe I'm still going to go with just one piece and use this as the front. So I truly think that this might be the way I go. Let's put my other fall colors with those just in case I decide to do any strip piecing. Now, I have one more choice. I started pulling out landscape fabrics, and I thought, what fun to do a landscape, because there at Central Park, we do have little ponds and garden areas, so something like a landscape behind the trees might be really beautiful. You can see what I mean. When I wash my fabrics and then just throw them in my stash, sometimes I don't even trim up those edges until I'm getting ready to use this fabric. So I hope that you can laugh along with me and know that my stash is not Instagram ready. It's not one of those stashes that are all folded up into neat little pieces and put on shelves so everybody can marvel at all your beautiful colors. No, I've got a big bin for each color, and I just rifle through those all the time to find the collection of fabrics that I want to use for my next project. Okay, so as I was looking through all my landscape fabrics, I found quite a few that I really liked that would be absolutely beautiful. This one actually has some huge tree trunks on it already, so that would be kind of cool. But once again, it's too small. It's just not big enough to do what I need it to do. However, could I strip piece all of these together and get the look of the landscape that I'm looking for behind the trees? Absolutely. But look at all that green. When I put my leaves on top of these greens, they're just going to blend in and kind of fade away. So I believe that I'm not going to use something with as much green as this in the background. But I came across one more choice. So here's another landscape fabric. I'm going to keep those all together. If I did decide to do a strip piecing kind of thing, all of those landscapes would go together. But I came across one more choice. Now this would be really unique. This would be really different. Once again, if I'm thinking about going to a park and seeing the trees, I might go to a park in Japan. I might see these beautiful cranes and the mountains and these beautiful little buildings up here that are up in the mountains. And I might see this through a stand of trees. So this would be a wonderful choice to use behind my trees, and it would give me a totally different look, wouldn't it? But if I use that fabric, I would want to turn my trees into maybe cherry trees. Maybe I would put cherry blossoms all over these trees. So I could certainly use the trees and the leaves, but maybe I would add a whole bunch of pink beads for cherry blossoms, or maybe actual flowers. I could take the actual flowers off of silk flowers and stitch those down on top of my trees and make beautiful, beautiful cherry blossoms. So I love that idea, but it really gets me going in a totally different direction. And I think I would rather reserve this fabric for a quilt that I'm specifically doing to look like something from Japan. As much as I love this and I think it would be really cool with the trees in front of it, I'm going to put this one aside. So here, I'm asking you for your opinion, and I'm already telling you my opinion and making these decisions as I go. But I'd really like to hear your opinions as well. Which fabric would you use if you had these types of choices? We could go with all of the fall leaves in the background. We could go with the naturescape in the background with the green leaves. We could do the cityscape background with either something like this or something like this for our cityscape. And we could also choose to go with that beautiful sky in the background and all of these beautiful leaves. Now, each one of these would make a gorgeous quilt. I just have to make a choice and move forward. Now, some of the time when I am choosing fabrics for a project, sometimes that is a big stumbling block, isn't it? And it's really hard to make a decision and move forward, because what if you make the wrong decision? Okay, I'm going to come look at your yes, I'm gonna look at your comments now. Your 2 cents is the fall colors. You're late, no worries. Everybody can be late. Ferns, number 1, Helen, and Japanese, number 2. Those are your choices. Okay. Loving fabric too much to use. Yes, that is definitely a problem that I have. Good morning from Michigan. Good morning from Florida. Nice to see all of you here today. Okay, so the fall colors is getting 1 vote. The ferns are getting another vote. The Japanese fabric is getting another vote. Well, I have to make that choice. I have to make that decision, and I've got to make it fast because I've got to get this piece quilted. So when we talk about quilting a background for a project like this, I want you to think an all-over quilting design. Now this one was done by my professional machine quilter, so it really is a very big all-over quilting design, and she used a light bobbin thread. Now I would not use a light bobbin thread when I'm quilting my own quilts. Of course, a professional machine quilter is going to do what's easiest for the front of the quilt. So the front of the quilt was beige, so she used a beige thread on the top, and she used the matching beige thread in the bobbin. By quilting our own quilts, we have more control, don't we? Well, first of all, I would never choose a solid for my background. I would choose a very, very busy print for the background so that that quilting just disappears. When I'm quilting my own quilts, I don't want the quilting to show because I'm not that good at it. So let me show you the background on the temperature quilt. This is the perfect background, and actually it would be a great choice for my leaves. That would be a great choice for a background for the Quilt As You Go leaves because it has all those pretty fall colors in it. It's got the gray. That would be a really nice background, but I don't have enough of that either. But that's the background that I chose for this quilting. Now you can see I've got quilting that's very dominant in the front, those long lines of pearls on the front, but see how it just blends right in on the back. Now I'm sure if we go at an angle, you may be able to see the quilting, but it's not that obvious, is it? So that's what I love about these busy backgrounds, is it allows you time to become a better machine quilter. You don't have to be worried about each little detail. And I want to tell you that I'm not a very good machine quilter. I don't worry about every little detail. I bet you by looking at this, you're saying, wow, that's really well done. It's really beautiful. But if you look at each individual section, you're going to see my quilting is all over the place. When you look at these feathers, for example, we've got pretty little feathers here. The next row has a great big awkward looking feather, and this next row has a big tall skinny feather. Every one of my feathers is done differently. There's nothing consistent about it. The same thing with these curvy lines. If I look at the individual curvy lines, I see all kinds of imperfections. I see some bumpiness there where I need a little bit more quilting. There's just too much fabric in that area, and I ended up with some puckering in that area. But as soon as you pull back and you put the whole quilt together, your eye is not going to find those little errors. So I want you to think about your quilting as practice. I bet you your first pieced quilt was not perfect. Maybe the corners didn't come together just so. Maybe you had some little bumps or ripples. Maybe you have even had a little pleat in a seam here and there where the two pieces of fabric did not want to go together. Our quilting progress shows in our quilts, and you can look back on that first quilt and your last quilt and see huge progress. Well, the problem is that most people don't start machine quilting until they've seen that huge progress on their piecing or on their applique. And they don't want to go back to square one on the quilting because now we have a discrepancy, right? Your skills for your piecing and your applique are going like this, and unless you're practicing, your machine quilting skills are staying here. What I'm encouraging my quilters to do is to start machine quilting their quilts from the beginning so that when your piecing skills or your applique skills are still in their infancy, so is your quilting. But as your skills grow, they're going to grow together, and your quilts are going to reflect that. Your beginning quilts might not be as perfect as you would like them to be, but as you get better and better and better, you see your quilts climbing that ladder all the way up to some beautiful professional looking quilts. But many of us did not start machine quilting until our skills were already up here for piecing and for applique. That's why it's hard to see this discrepancy, right? You don't want your quilting to be here when your other skills are up here. We need to gradually close that gap. So by taking some machine quilting workshops, and I always incorporate some machine quilting workshops in our Ahead of the Curve membership, you're going to help those skills grow and build them up so that they can compete with your piecing and your applique skills. Not compete exactly, but complement those beautiful piecing and applique skills that you have developed over the years. Hey, Sojourner Tracy, nice to see you. The galloping horse theory, absolutely, Helen. It looks good to me if I'm on a galloping horse, or if I'm, even 1 foot away. You're not going to pick up all of those little problems or deficiencies in your quilting. So that's why I'm encouraging everybody to start doing some machine quilting. Now, I am going to refer you to a couple of programs that I think are wonderful, to one in particular. One program that I think is wonderful is Free Motion Mastery in a Month. This is Renee Merrill's program. Renee was a piano teacher, and she uses her expertise in teaching the piano and translates that into teaching free motion quilting. So if you want some great basic free motion classes, if you want to start off at ground zero, as if you've never quilted before and really learn every step of the way, I highly recommend Renee's Free Motion Mastery in a Month. It does come, you can buy it separately. It is a membership. You can get it with her books and with her training workbook. All of this comes together in this cute little tote when you join her program, and I highly recommend her program. Renee and I used to travel together. We got to be friends, but I just truly respect what she's doing. I think it's the right way to teach a beginner. Now, even though, I should never say a beginner or somebody who's new to free motion quilting. When we say beginners, sometimes that turns people off, right? Nobody ever wants to be a beginner again. I embrace being a beginner. I think that being a beginner is a great place because you are open to all of the possibilities. If I'm an expert in my piecing, I can still be a beginner in my quilting. That's okay. I'm not calling myself a beginner quilter in general. I'm a beginner at machine quilting, and I'm open to learning all different techniques. Now, there are some wonderful machine quilting teachers out there. Renee is not the only one. She's just one that I know personally, and I really love and respect her program. Yes, you need to learn how to match the fabric movement to the speed of the needle, Tracy. Yes. Renee's repetitive motion techniques are very, very good for that. And she has you do a lot of practicing on paper. The biggest hurdle with machine quilting is knowing where you're going to go next. Your brain can't plan where to go next and still keep that motion for each individual shape moving as you're planning a step ahead. So gaining that hand-eye coordination and the muscle memory for each one of those shapes, that's what Renee specializes in. So she's going to be a great starting program for you, and then you'll move on, right? She has a wonderful starting program, and then she continues to add to that program for more advanced quilters. But there are other quilters out there that do more advanced things, and you'd be great with them as well after you start off with the fundamentals. So I call Renee the fundamentals of quilting. She is the expert on the fundamentals, and really, if you go through her program, you're gonna benefit so much. Then there's a lot of other people out there. I love Lisa Kaye. I think her quilting style is absolutely beautiful. She has a membership that's very low cost where you can watch what she does on her quilts and learn the design phase of the quilting. So in our workshops, we do a lot of pre-planning on the quilting. I actually draw most of my quilting designs right on the fabric because I'm not good at just filling a space out of my head. I have to know where I'm going. I have to know what's planned next so that I can make these beautiful shapes and I don't have to think 2 steps ahead of where I'm going to go next. So if that makes sense, that's what we do a lot in my workshops is we pre-plan our quilting. We use a lot of walking foot quilting to separate our areas and then free motion quilting to fill in those areas. Now, I'm not an expert on machine quilting, but as my skills have risen, I've quilted more and more of my quilts. As my skills have risen, I gain more skills because I'm not afraid to try. It's only when you're in that beginner phase and your other skills are up here. When you're in that beginner phase, it's really, really hard to put beginner level quilting on really beautiful quilts. So I'm going to recommend you really work with things that you don't care about all that much. Case in point, something like this. The quilting on the background of this quilt, it barely shows, right? It's all about the trees. So the quilting just runs right into the background. So this is a great project to start with. Now I keep going back to that project because that's what's coming up and that's what I'm planning for today. But you can just take layers of fabric and sandwich it together and go ahead and get ready for your machine quilting practice just with a quilt sandwich. So let's go ahead and do that now. I'm going to see if I can change my camera. And I want to change that camera to my overhead camera here at my ironing station. I've got my iron ready to go, and I'm going to get the fabric ready to go for this machine quilting project. So let's decide right now what I'm going to use. I'm going to go ahead and use this beautiful fall colored background. And so let's just get that ironed out. And I want to show you how to use the fusible batting. Okay, so normally, because this was just washed and pressed, I would go ahead and take this over to my cutting station and cut off all of these raw edges and square everything up and make it look beautiful and cut it the exact size that was requested in the pattern. Well, I'm not going to do that today because I don't want to waste your time. So I'm just going to do a small sample here and show you how I use this batting. So the batting was all wrinkled up on the roll. So I made sure I took that batting out and left it overnight. In fact, it's been out for a few days here. And it's helped to relax some of those wrinkles. So I'm just cutting off the excess fabric and I'm just going to smooth out the batting. It really is still wrinkled from being in the packaging. So just with my fingernails, I'm just spreading it out in all directions. Then I'm going to cover that piece over with my ferns. Now I did this the other day and somebody just about came right through the screen at me and said, "Why would you rip your fabric?" Well, I always rip fabric when I'm just trying to get it to a rough size. I don't need to cut that fabric when I can just rip it and it will straighten out that grain. And I know that now I have a straight grain piece of fabric. But look what it did to my edges. So I never ever rip fabric that I'm going to use for piecing. But if I'm just layering a quilt like this in order to do some machine quilting, I can absolutely rip the edges because I've got an extra inch all the way around beyond my batting, and I'm going to be cutting that off anyway. So with the fusible batting, I'm just ironing the fabric, and because the fusible batting is cotton, it wants to stick to the cotton fabric. Cotton fabric loves to stick to cotton batting. And for a small project like this, you probably could get by without really fusing these layers together. But I've got the fusible batting and I want to use it. So how do I use this fusible batting? Well, it's not fused yet. There's a little bit stuck down, but if I pull it away, it's going to pull away easily. What I really want to do is heat that in every spot for 5 seconds. So I have to count 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5 Mississippi. Well, those of you that know me, that know that I use Misty Fuse, I don't usually do this where I'm overlapping my iron just slightly and counting to 5 every time I move my iron. We don't have to do that with our Misty Fuse when we're fusing our fabric. But the fusible batting is different. You're going to really want to get that fused very well. And if I just iron over it like I do with my Misty Fuse, it doesn't fuse well enough. I have to really give it that full 5 seconds before I move to the next area. So obviously this is going to take a little bit longer than I want for you sitting here watching me fuse this fabric. So I'm not going to take the time to do that all the way across. Now I want to show you my next step. After I fuse the edges of that fabric, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to grab a little tiny mat here, but I have a much bigger one that I would normally use. And I'm going to pull that fabric back to expose the batting, or I can just feel where that batting ends. And now I want to square up this piece. So I'm using my big 21 or 20.5-inch square so that I can square up these edges. And then if I had a bigger cutting mat, obviously I wouldn't have to move this around quite so much, but my cutting mat is on my other table, and my other table I can't get into the picture here. So make sure you have both layers really well fused, which I haven't done that yet, but you get the picture. We're going to fuse it really well first, and then we're going to go and we're going to square up these pieces. Okay, so getting rid of all that excess fabric that goes beyond the batting. So that's how I'm going to get my quilt sandwich ready for quilting. Now, on the instructions for the batting, it does say that you can fuse both layers at once. And remember, I haven't fused this all the way down yet, but let's see what happens on the other side when I keep this in place for a full 5 seconds. So 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5 Mississippi. Do you count that way too when you're trying to keep it going? Now, what's happened on the back is I've got some little ripples, right? I hadn't smoothed out my back completely. I hadn't even looked at my back. And now I've got some little ripples in my fabric. So yes, you can fuse both layers at once, but guess what? It's really not completely fused. So I'm going to lay this back down, smoothing it out from the center. Then I'm going to start in the center, counting to 5. I'm going to do this on the back and the front. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5 Mississippi. Okay, I really want to give this a really nice hot press. And I'm going to do that all the way across the fabric. And let's take a peek now. Okay, let's let that cool down for a second. And what happened? Yeah, there we go. That batting is really holding onto the backing. And when I turn it over, the front is also very smooth. And is that front holding on to, oh, that let go. Let's see, let me do that one more time. you have to give it a lot of heat. Let's do that again. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5 Mississippi. As I said, these cotton battings want to hold on to the cotton fabric. So it might fool you. You might think you have it all layered and nice and stuck all the way through, and then it might lift up on you. Okay, if that happens and you can't get the back to fuse, I think they more heavily put fusible on the front of this batting, and the back is not as good, it seems to me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my Misty Fuse scraps. I'm going to grab some Misty Fuse scraps, and I'm not going to worry about the center of the quilt, but I want to make sure that the edges of the quilt are well adhered. So if I pull back that backing and it doesn't want to stick, I can go ahead and put some little spots of Misty Fuse right along the edges of that batting, and that way you're going to get your edges down well, and it doesn't take as much heat when you're using the Misty Fuse to get that batting together. Now, yesterday I didn't have that problem. Maybe it's this batik fabric. I know that it was washed, so I don't think it's the finish on the fabric, but for some reason it just didn't want to stick, although the front was sticking very well. So I'm not quite sure what the issue was, but now that I have the fusible in there, that fabric is not going anywhere. So if in doubt, use a little bit of fusible web on the edges of your piece. I certainly did not have to do that with my temperature quilt, and I'm surprised I had to do that here. Okay, let me come back to you on the camera, and there we go. Okay, so now, yeah, Misty Fuse. I use all of my little bits and pieces. Yeah, you like the Mississippis too. That's how I count when I need to make sure I'm doing 5 seconds and I'm not rushing things. Otherwise, I tend to rush through things. So I'm always counting my Mississippis. Misty Fuse. Misty Fuse is such a wonderful fusible. I use that for all of my appliques, so I always have it hanging around. In fact, I've got a drawer in my filing cabinet over here, and all those leftover pieces of Misty Fuse get swooped right into that filing cabinet. So I might have some little tiny strips. That's going to be a wonderful way to base those layers together. Now, Misty Fuse also sells what she calls zips. They're little leftover strips of Misty Fuse that she cuts off the ends of her rolls, and she puts them in a little box, and so you can always have some scraps of Misty Fuse handy. I just find if I want zips, I'm going to just take a package of my Misty Fuse. Where's my package of Misty Fuse? Hold on, here it is. Okay, so I'm just going to grab my package of Misty Fuse. If I don't have lots of scraps hanging around, I'm going to take out that entire package and I'm going to unfold it once. So this is 2.5 yards. I'm going to use my ruler and my rotary cutter and cut this into 1-inch strips or even 1/2-inch strips, and I can use those instead of the Misty Fuse zips. But I don't tend to do that because I usually have scraps hanging around anyway. Okay, so now I've got my backing and my batting all ready to go. I've got my quilt sandwich ready to go, almost. I've got a little bit more work to do here. Then I'm going to go in and quilt this with free motion. That's going to get my background ready for the Quilt As You Go trees. And if you're taking that workshop with me in February, you're going to want to get your background ready too. So how am I going to quilt that background? Well, I have a whole bunch of resources here. I have all different quilting books, but my favorite one is missing. My favorite quilting book, let's see if I can find it. Here it is. My favorite quilting book is 365 Free Motion Quilting Designs. I have this on my website because I love it so much. So you can purchase this book, and in this book it gives you 365 different designs. It has a big color photograph of those designs and it has a day number. You can go to Leah Day's website and you can watch her YouTube videos. So you can either go to Leah Day's website or go to her YouTube videos, search 365 free motion quilting designs, and every day for a year, Leah was showing us how to make these designs. After a full year of creating a design a day on YouTube, she then published the book with just those large pictures. So the actual instructions are not in the book, but you can go to her YouTube videos and see how she quilted each of these designs. Okay, another good resource. I just picked up a whole bunch of things. So I've got organic free motion quilting ideas from Amanda Murphy. Amanda's a great machine quilter as well, and she tells how to put different designs together and how to use them in different shapes on your quilts. So she's got some basic designs, and then she shows you how to fill different shapes using those designs. Here's another Amanda Murphy free motion idea book, Mix and Match Designs. So here again, she shows you what type of designs she would use on different patterns. So she has one pattern and she shows you several different ways to quilt it. So that's a nice resource as well. There are lots of different quilting books out there. You have to find your favorites or just go on YouTube and watch people quilt. That will inspire you. Then you're going to go from there and you're going to start drawing in a notebook. You're just going to doodle in the evening while you're sitting in front of the television. Draw a shape and just doodle inside of it. Draw something. If you have a piece design, you can print out the piece design and just doodle inside of all the pieces. Or for what I'm doing, I'm just taking a couple of fat quarters, layering them together, and I'm just going to doodle all over the whole thing. Your quilting is not going to matter all that much on this particular project, so this is the perfect place to practice. I'll probably choose one of Leah Day's designs and do the whole piece with the same design, or I can do it in layers. I can do the foreground under the trees, maybe something a little bit bigger, go a little bit smaller as I go back behind those trees, or I go up on that background. You can play around with different designs. You don't have to be bored by using the same design on the whole thing. All right, well, I hope that's given you a little bit of guidance on how to get ready for that workshop. And if you're not taking the workshop, I hope this has given you a little incentive to go get some fat quarters. Layer them together with either the fusible batting or regular old cotton batting. Use your Misty Fuse to base those layers together. You can put the Misty Fuse between the top and the batting and iron it, and then put the Misty Fuse behind the batting and put your back on and iron it. That way you'll get some pieces ready for quilting, and you can get your quilting skills right creeping up there to level out to your piecing and your applique skills. You're very excited, Tracy, and you're ready to give it a try. Terrific. Yes, Leah Day has wonderful tutorials. She is one of my go-to people for quilting, and she's as nice as she is talented. What a beautiful lady. I love Leah Day, and I think you'll really learn a lot from her. Okay. Okay. My schedule so you can learn more. Okay, Tracy. Tracy, we have a membership, and in our membership, people take workshops with me every month. In the membership are recorded videos. We have on-demand workshops that you can take anytime you want to. We have video tutorials every step along the way. My specialty is rotary cut applique. When I'm talking about these workshops, they are for my members only. However, we do have a 6-week workshop coming up to make gradations. Gradations is the quilt on my side wall there. I'm going to just move things around. I was trying to show you my table, but let's go ahead and show you my back wall there. That Gradations quilt is a wonderful introductory project, and you don't have to be in the membership to join. Gradations is going to start in late February. we are going to be having a program called Fabulous Fusibles. That's right here at the bottom of my screen. Sign up for Fabulous Fusibles and you'll hear all about gradations. We have some very special bonuses for those people that come to Fabulous Fusibles, and we're going to give you a bonus on the gradations. I won't tell you what that bonus is yet, but if you are interested, come ahead to Fabulous Fusibles. You're going to learn all about using that MISTI Fuse, rotary cutting your applique, and how to get into the gradations class when it starts in February. All right, well, it has been so much fun here on Sewing in Slippers with all of you. I didn't get to my latest temperature quilt project, so I'll save that for another day. And I'm going to go get caught up on all of my projects and get started quilting that background for Quilt As You Go Trees. It's been nice to spend my morning with you. Go ahead and check out Fabulous Fusibles at SuePellinDesigns.com. When you go to my website, you're going to see a pink banner. Just click on that pink banner. It's going to take you to the registration page. We've got space for 500 students in Fabulous Fusibles, and I hope one of them is going to be you. Until next time, I will see you all sewing in slippers the next time we get together. Have a wonderful day.